Hello everyone, welcome to the Weeb Initiative. I'm your host, the Weeb. This is the show where every other week I'll be talking about anime, manga, and everything in between. This week I'll be talking about and following the theme for this season. I'll be introducing you to the horror genre. And to do that, I'll be talking about Hellgirl, or Jigoku Shoujo in Japanese. Before I even start, first disclaimers, spoiler alert. I'll be talking about all the spoilers, although there's not much story to this, kind of. Second one is that I will be only talking about the first season, basically that. And the third disclaimer is that after rewatching it, Jigoku Shoujo or Hellgirl is pretty weak for a horror anime, in my humble opinion. Although I personally am pretty weak when it comes to horror, so I chose this based more on my own circumstances, because I'm a scared cat and I really don't like horror at all. And from what I could remember from the first time I watched it, Hellgirl was really kind of spooky, but I could deal with it. And so for this reason, I've chosen to review this as a horror entry, although as a disclaimer, I would suggest there are other, let's say, more horrific horrors out there in the anime space that I choose not to cover because, again, I'm bad with this kind of stuff. Anyways, before I even start with the plot, let's start with the stats. And for once, right, when I'm talking about introductions, Hellgirl or Jigoku Shoujo is actually an original anime made by Studio Dean. The first season was run from October 2005 to April 2006. It has 26 episodes. Then the manga was released in November 2005 and ran through September 2008. Although I don't actually know if the manga and the anime go through the same stuff. I frankly don't know. I know the manga went on to have more spin-offs and continuations, but I don't actually know if they cover the other seasons that the anime has. The second season of the show was also made by Studio Dean. Studio Dean, before I continue, Studio Dean, just to make, let's say, the benchmark, they are the guys doing Konosuba, Konosubarashi World, you know the one. And basically that's it. They have a whole long history of doing anime, and famous anime at that. So that's basically it. Continue with what I was saying. The second season, Jigoku Shoujo Futakomori, or the Two Mirrors, was run from October 2006 to April 2007, with also 26 episodes. I think they had a 1-year contract, because from what I remember, the first and the second season came out really close together. Then there was the drama, let's say the live action adaptation, the series, made from November 2006 to January 2007, with 12 episodes. Then there's the mangas. They call video game here, but I am pretty sure it's just a visual novel. Then the third season of the anime was the Three Vessels, from October 2008 to April 2009. And then the fourth, and I think the last season, as far as I know, the fourth Twilight, which was run from July 2017 to September 2017 with 12 episodes. As a brief note, as I already said, this anime is an original anime. It was created to be an anime idealized by the director Katahiro Omori, and that's basically the stats. just before I continue, this is going to be a really quick review and presentation because all things considered, I don't actually need to present horror because it's the same thing with movies. It's horror. You know what you're basically up against. Let's say you know what you're up to, but granted, Hellgirl does not have jump scares. I don't actually know if it was a stylistic or let's say a plot choice, but due to the fact that it was broadcast in normal television in Japan, I think they actually toned it down a bit, which would explain the fact that I personally think it's pretty weak, but that's just the conjecture of all the things I can see around it. So with the stats taken care of, let's go to the plot. So Hellgirl or Jigoku Shoujo is pretty simple at the start. It has 26 episodes, but let's just say the focus kind of pivots from the 14th episode forward onward because the things kind of change. I think they noticed that a lot of people were getting fed up with the whole premise. So let me explain. From the first to the 13th episode, it's basically the same chick. So we get introduced to random person. Each episode has one different story. So we get introduced to a single person. This person, for some reason, lives their lives and whatever, but something happens that they develop a grudge, desire for revenge, something like that. Basically, they developed a beef with someone, and when I say a beef, right, it is in some cases a pretty serious stuff. Things like destroy your whole social life or whatever. So basically, the one that goes around a lot and rolls around ever so often, I think there are at the very least, if there are not like 5, there's 6 or 7 instances of something bullying someone at school, and you know what I'm saying. The same, they repeat a lot of the same thematic. I don't know if again this is a stylistic choice or they are toning down, or they had other ideas but they got shut down for one reason or another. But the thing is, bullying is one of the main themes that reappear, but there are also other ones. There are some. One of them is a guy, basically he gets accused, basically he gets set up as being the murderer of his friend, but the guy knows the original murderer and the murderer won't admit it, so the guy just gets wrecked from his social life, his parents, his school and whatever, and then he goes into despair. And then we get to the main, let's say, mechanic, the main plot device of the whole thing. So, and again, the anime was done in 2005. I have a guess that it more or less represents something like 2003, 2004, because it was back when we didn't have, first off, we didn't have smartphones, and not everyone had a cell phone, and even more than that, computers were not commonplace in homes, right? So in some cases, people, they would use their office computer, their school computers and whatever to access this mystical website that appears on Google for some reason called Hell-Link, and it has some kind of magic, some kind of stuff that it only lets you access it on midnight, on the dot. So 11:59, you won't access it. You only access it going on midnight until you finish your, let's say, your request. So it opens up a black screen, insert your grudge or something like that. The person types their name, the name of the people they want the grudge to be resolved with, the revenge, the people that they want to be killed, more basically, and click send. And seconds later, Helga appears. It's her name is Emma I. For the first 13 episodes, it doesn't actually matter her too much, but I'll get to that. And she basically offers you a straw doll with a red string attached to it. If you untie the knot, the contract with her is basically done, and she will send the person you have a grudge against to hell, straight up. But in doing that, the price you pay is that the moment you die, eventually, you will go to hell too. Your soul will go to hell and suffer for eternity. And that's basically the whole thing for 13 episodes. And we get to see cases and more cases of people, why they choose to do it, why they question themselves into doing it, if people rationalize it. And it kind of brings up a lot of questions we have in terms of not only, let's say, how we deal with things, but also how things work, right? So there's one case where a girl has her pet dog and takes the dog to the vet, but then eventually she discovers that the vet neglects the dog and basically leaves it to die. And when she discovers it, she basically becomes desperate because she doesn't actually have family, and doesn't actually have family besides the dog because her parents died and whatever. And the whole thing kind of goes around into this question whether revenge is justified, and there are stronger cases, let's say, cases where people actually get way more, let's not mix words here, people get way more fucked over for different reasons, whatever. But the gist of it is that for every type of grudge, each person has a type of grudge that's different. And for any grudge, there is Emma I, the Hell Girl, to deliver the revenge. And the whole thing is that at the beginning is that Emma I is basically just someone you contract to do the dirty work, and she's neutral throughout all the cases that we see her doing it. Obviously, saying like that, the anime takes a bit of care to show different cases in different styles, different storytelling techniques, let's say. So in some cases, the person already has basically the straw doll, and then we get to see some interaction they have with a third party to explain how we came to this point that they actually contacted Hellink. And different cases show up for different reasons and in different forms, and we get to see all of them unfold. From what I can say, and I don't actually remember if this is correct, I think all the episodes have this string being pulled. All the episodes have someone being sent to hell by Helga throughout the whole anime, except for the ending, because I will explain the ending later, but easy to say. Every time she sends someone to hell, it's the horror part of the episode, more or less. So for the most part, when the person pulls the string and the target is sent to hell, we get to see, let's say, their air quotes notification of being revenged, more or less. They don't actually get notified, but Emma and her servants, they orchestrates some, basically a spooking. It's basically the reason why this is considered a horror anime. The target passes through a horrific experience. It's basically a huge illusion where some of their worst fears appear and whatever. So, for instance, some people they love become skeletons, or they lose their job. There's some different kind of things depending on the target. And basically that's it for the first 13 episodes. From the 14th towards the end, we get introduced to what we would call the main characters of the story outside from MI. MI doesn't actually have her backstory until way later on, but easy to say that for half of the anime there's no story at all. They're just the assorted cases of different people contacting Hellink. And from the 14th episode forward, we get to meet Shibata Hajime and Shibata Tsugumi. Shibata Hajime is a freelancer journalist that works for Tabloid. I think he never really quits, but let's say he's really a freelancer. So you see he come and go whenever he likes. He doesn't have a stable job. That's the point. And then his daughter, Shibata Tsugumi. I'll get this one right. It's Tsugumi. I checked this time. Who's his daughter, and he's a single father. And at the beginning that we meet him, we get to see that he's a divorcee, although that develops a bit towards the end of the anime. Who are they? What's their connection to Helger, right? So for one reason or another, it's not really explained why at the beginning, but MI, the Helgirl, she has this ability to go from her home, that's the purgatory, from what we can infer, to the real world to investigate most of the cases, because she kind of validates before actually accepting to avenge a grudge. More or less, she does kind of scouting it so she can become more or less invisible to normal people and whatever, teleport and go through walls and whatever. But the thing is, she can teleport from purgatory to the normal world, and for one reason or another, she starts this connection with Tsugumi. So whenever I goes to, let's say, meet a client and offer that not only the doll but also get to see the grudge, the target of the grudge, Tsugumi also gets this, I'd say, this outer world. She kind of becomes aesthetic and sees what I sees, and from this point on, Hajime, as a freelancer journalist and as a, let's say, good guy of the story, he starts this quest to stop Hellgirl from killing people, because it's all fine and dandy that she's avenging someone, but to contract someone to kill someone else to revenge it's wrong in a moral standpoint. So there's that. And this is the part where, although the anime starts getting kind of interesting, it kind of gets really bad at the same time, because for the most part, it brings up the question when Hajime first starts appearing, and eventually when they get a bit more forward in the story, he actually starts to know where the people that are trying to get revenge are, and the whole thing, he tries to impede people from pulling the string, or even basically try to get rid of the doll most of the time, because he can only find the people after Tsugumi has the vision. So all of them already got the temptation to already pull the string and get over with it. but he tries to convince anyone that he finds to not pull it because killing someone is wrong and whatever, and we can find another way, and so on and so forth. The thing is, from this point on, the anime, and this is already my opinion, but the anime kind of gets really boring and becomes more of a horror B movie, let's say. At some point it just becomes really not convoluted, but it becomes really wasted effort to think like, if someone already went through the trouble to contact Hellgirl and basically already got the doll, do you really think they will not pull it? Like, are you serious? Really? I mean, there's, I think, one single case that he kind of did succeed in convincing someone to not pull it, but they end up pulling it because of, let's say, external circumstances. And for the most part, in every single time that he tries to convince someone to not pull it, it kind of, to me at the very least, as audience, it puts me against the main character. Let's say I'm rooting for the antagonist at this point, because first off, the anime is pretty boring if you think about it. When you actually are watching it, most of the anime is pretty boring. The one part that is interesting at the very least is the spooky part, where I sending someone to hell. And the thing is, if they don't pull it, there's no spooky, and I'm here for the spooky, so I prefer that they pull it, right? Not only that, but for the most part, the stories all revolve around the same thing. Some kind of life, not only social, but life in general, depending on this revenge, more or less. And for the most part, I think most of the characters that appear, their revenge is justifiable, although there are two cases where it's not really. The first one is when, and this, I think they went off the rails big time. Eventually, Hajime and Tsugumi, they find a ghost that contacts MI with no apparent, let's say, medium. So the ghost doesn't have a computer in the house they live in. So it's really strange. Although it's a fairly okay episode if you like the spooking, because it's one of the, let's say, the best air quotes episodes there is, because there's horror there, although it's not really strong, but still it's way better than most of the episodes. And the second one is later on the story, when Hajime and Tsugumi are kind of having they have distant opinions about Hellgirl, because Tsugumi believes that having her avenge someone else on bad people is a-okay, because you would think that retributing bad deeds with a punishment and at this point, bad deeds, when I say this, is really, really fucked up stuff, with sending them to hell is justifiable, and Hajime believes that killing someone is wrong, and that's basically it. At this point in the story, they have this dissident opinion, and the writers, to try to pivot the audience towards the Hajime's opinion, they implant this one episode where there's a girl who's a good girl. She studies medicine, she's a nurse at a hospital, and nobody that Hajime talks to can find a single flaw on the girl. She's a-okay, no problems at home, no problems at work, no problems anywhere in her life. She's a-okay, no questions asked. And the plot of the episode really is the fact that Tsugumi has this vision that MI has offered this straw doll to someone to kill this girl, and the girl has no apparent, let's say, no apparent connection to Hellink or whatever, and the whole thing is them banging their heads against the wall to try to find the person that, if she received the doll, who she wants to kill or who wants to kill her. And at the end of the episode, it's just a random guy appears at the hospital she works in, unties the knot in front of everybody. When Hajime goes to confront the guy, he's basically a crackhead with no apparent reasoning for doing that. And so the story tries to pivot the perspective of if Hellink is, let's say, indifferent service to the reason for the grudge, the reason for the vengeance, then you could use the vengeance to do bad stuff. You could actually target someone to kill someone with no real or not good intentions, let's say, and not to be avenged, but to try to gain something out of it, let's say, to gain something out of killing someone. And that's basically the gist of the episode, which this episode in specific, it's pretty forced, and I really don't see why they did this, because at this point, as I've already said, the whole thing about the anime at the start is that people choose what they choose. You cannot change much of it. And as the anime shows again and again, most of the times that Hajime tries to interfere, to convince people to not pull the string, they always do, or they don't, and that's not something that you can actually change. It's from person to person. Everyone has their own, let's say, their own choice in the matter. And from this point on, basically, as I was saying, most of the deaths are justified, some of them are not, and some of the things that happen in the anime are really strange. That being said, what happens at the end of the anime is that we finally discover that for some reason Emai actually has a past, and for some reason she chose Tsugumi not by chance, let's say, but by, let's say, connection, because we find out that there's ancestor of Shibata, of Hajime, and Tsugumi for that matter, that was Emai's friend in life when Emai was alive. And so we have this whole backstory, this lore dump, that basically I was a villager in feudal Japan, in a really poor village, and they had this tradition to, whenever every 7 years, I think, every time a child reached 7 years in age, a girl, I don't actually remember the let's say the conditional for the choice, but whenever something 7 years pass or whatever, they would sacrifice a child with 7 years of age to the mountain god to have fertile harvests and whatever. The thing is, when came time to be sacrificed, Hajime's ancestor, Shibata Sentaro, he tried to protect her, and he kind of could for some time until the villagers discovered it, and they found out that basically this was more or less treason and made the mountain gods angry. So Ai and her whole family were killed in the process, and in the midst of being pressured in the horrific burning alive of the Ai's family, Sentaro kind of threw some earth at them, and I saw it, and she became consumed with a grudge of, you were supposed to protect me, because they were basically childhood friends and they kind of liked each other and whatever. But the thing is, right, so she's consumed by this rage, this hatred, and eventually Sentaro actually runs away to not help to bury alive his childhood friend, but I didn't see the part where he ran away and tried not to bury her, to help to bury her. And so she became furious with grudge, with the vengeance. And a few days later, after they were sacrificed, Sentaro went to the point where I was buried and saw that she kind of resurrected with supernatural powers, and so she scorched the whole village to the ground, and Sentaro ran for it alone. The whole thing is, they cut this part, but basically when I finished raising the whole village, she went through hell, and as a punishment for defying one of the gods, she was sentenced to be Hell Girl for the rest of eternity. And so that's why she's there. And the last 3 episodes is about how I want to kill Hajime as a way to quell her rage against Sentaro, because she can't see the part where he runs away at the start, at the very least. And so she heavy hands it, tries to make Tsugumi to pull a string in a straw doll after showing her the truth about her mother, because of actually and this is one of the parts where I don't actually like the characters in this anime. We eventually find out the backstory of Hajime and Tsugumi, that Hajime was originally married to Tsugumi's mother, and he was the one who proposed it. He was the one who basically pulled forward and whatever, and had Tsugumi and whatever. And at some point he started to bury himself in work and not care for his wife or Tsugumi. And I will not say justifiably, okay? I will not say justifiably, but the anime shows in a way that I would say that he had it coming. His wife starts an affair with another man and leaves him. And the scene is pretty damning, let's say. When she was pregnant, he would leave for work and not return for days. And that basic, let's say, the husband who basically abandons his wife, more or less, kind of trope. And at some point when she tries to make up, Hajime basically sends her off without giving nothing, and she dies in an accident right next to their home. And at the time, Hajime doesn't own it. He tries to say that it's not his fault. And this is the scene that goes on and on with Ai trying to make Tsugumi to pull the string, because she was trying to guilt trip Tsugumi into, you also have a grudge against your father. You also wanted to live with your mother. Your father is the one who is at fault for your mother dying, whatever. And at some point, Tsugumi doesn't actually pull the string, and Hajime finds her and basically says that, yes, it's my fault. I was a bad husband. I was a bad father. I'm a bad human, whatever. And basically, Ai's plan is more or less foiled. But as a last act of defiance, as a revenge for Hajime, as she's basically contractually not allowed to kill anyone outside of the Hellling contract, let's say, to pull the string and whatever, as she cannot freely kill someone, she raises the temple that Hajime's ancestor built, killing someone, but that's, let's say, collateral damage at this point, and the anime ends more or less, and that's basically it. The anime ends with a to be continued, because later on we would discover that there's a second to the 4th season, although I don't think the 4th season's has much content, given that it has 12 episodes. But I mean, from 2005 to 2017, the anime industry has changed a lot. Anyways, that's not the point. The thing is, that's the plot. It's a terrible plot. The beginning is kind of interesting until it becomes really redundant and repetitive, and then the last half of the anime becomes a B movie, which is pretty bad, and I don't like the main characters. I would not say I wanted Hajime to die, but he was not a good main character. Let's say he was not a good main character. Given that, what can I say about the genre of horror? So this one that I chose, Hellgirl, is a good introduction to horror because I think at the very least, because it's pretty weak and it kind of gives a vibe to it. The thing about horror anime is that being a series, I don't actually think you can keep up much of it. I know for a fact that I think recognized like 33 different types of horror, from slasher to torture to whatever, and this one is just supernatural horror. It's not really strong, not really. Some parts are pretty good, some parts are not really that good. But I think it's a good introduction if you are bad, as I am, with horror stuff and want to at the very least try something. Another one that I would suggest is, and I don't actually know the name in English, but I think it is Ghost Stories, which I remember that it was aired in Cartoon Network back in 2010, I think. 2010s, I don't actually remember, but I remember that being pretty good. Other ones, famous ones, is Another, which is, it has somewhat of a let's say a similar vibe to Hellgirl, but it's kind of different, although the vibe is kind of similar still. But I choose not to go with that. I prefer to stay on my lane of wholesome and some gory violence sometimes. That being said, right, and talking about the anime itself, animation is pretty okay, although it's not perfect. Some episodes are really better than others. Some episodes are really bad. There are some episodes that are really bad, and there are some episodes that you would say pretty good, given that the anime doesn't actually have, let's say, much color or much of visual focus. It's pretty serviceable given everything. The spooky parts are well done enough to not be bad. Talking about the music, just a quick side note, the opening and the ending both are pretty good. I think I don't actually remember the name of the songs, but they are really good, I would say. They have that mid-2000s anime vibe, which it's really nice. It really hits the nostalgia in me. But I don't think the opening actually fits into the thematic of Hellgirl. But anyways, that's not the point here. And that's basically it. So thank you for listening. If you like what I do, if you like the show, if you like the podcast, please like, please follow, please subscribe. Depending on the platform you're in, please join the Discord. I hope you stick around to the next one. Bye.